the world. And you go through and you look at why they left, and it mentions slavery over and over, and the Texas Declaration of Causes for Secession. And you're a historian, so I'm sure you've heard this and you know this, but they write about the African American race had no agency in their establishment. They were rightfully held and regarded as an inferior and dependent race. Slavery was mentioned over and over again. And so there is some concern that there's an attempt to rewrite why that war was fought.
No, it's an attempt to ignore the reason. Now, you're quick to point out to the lower South, which was in a situation where they were very fearful of a massive Haitian-style slave revolt. So, yeah, they were concerned. But what about the upper South? When Virginia, when North Carolina, even when Arkansas, when they seceded, they didn't list that as the reason they were seceding. They were seceding because Lincoln and the Republican Party was attempting to invade sovereign states, and that violated the Constitution. That's why they pulled out. So again, to say that slavery was the total cause is wrong. It's incorrect.
The major cause, would you say it's I mean, the vice president of the Confederacy in his cornerstone speech in 1861, our new government is founded upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery subordination of the superior race is his natural and normal condition. So,
well, then what about your President Lincoln? Huh? What about him? He said almost the exact same thing. The black race is inferior to the South, to the white race, and that he wanted Lincoln, even up until shortly before he was assassinated, Lincoln was working to ship all the blacks out of the country. Lincoln, who in his Illinois speech said, we want to preserve the Western territories as an area for free white people. And the crowds in Illinois just exploded in great admiration. That's a great thing. We don't want blacks out there. We don't want blacks in that part of the country. We wanted a white man's country. So people will point to something like Alexander Stephens' cornerstone speech, but they never mention the fact that after the war, Alexander Stephens made a wonderful speech talking about the need to bring blacks into the society as voting members of our society. No, that's never mentioned. No, that's not mentioned. Why is it not mentioned? Because it runs against the Yankee narrative.
Well, it may not be mentioned because during the time they were fighting the war, this would seem to indicate why they were fighting. He is the vice president of the Confederacy, and it's just, I think it's important to kind of understand why they were fighting as we discuss these monuments. And so I guess what I'm trying to figure out is exactly where you stand. You're saying it's not, slavery was a major reason or was not a major reason for the war? What would you say as far as slavery?
Well, slavery was certainly part of the whole environment. The Confederate Constitution forbade the slave trade. So yes, slavery was certainly part of it, but the Confederate Constitution did not allow for continuing of the slave trade. But to say that slavery was the totality of the thinking of the people of the South, that is a great slander to the vast majority of my relatives and the people who wore the gray in the War for Southern Independence, who were not part of the plantation slave system.
But these declarations of secession, is that a slander to the people of the Confederacy? The words in these declarations that mention slavery and the African American race, what about that?
That is as strange to our ears as President Lincoln's speech, isn't it? It is strange. No doubt about it. And is it insulted in present contemporary society? Of course it would be. But again, the lower South had been threatened over and over again by massive uprising of a Haitian-style uprising in which all white people, even those who did not own slaves, which was the majority, would be slaughtered. So yes, they were very afraid of the continuing provoking of a slave uprising, so that yes, they had to get out of it. But Governor Brandon of Mississippi, way back in 1820, made a speech in Mississippi legislature saying, look, slavery isn't evil. We must do everything we can to rid slavery from this state.
Well, he must have lost out, because later on in this article of secession in 1861, they're talking about it's an institution that is the greatest material interest in the world. I mean, so when the state declares the reason why it left, slavery is front and center.
And what you don't understand is that the Whigs, who were, if you understand, the Whigs were in favor of a strong central government. So they were probably about made up 40% of the political power in Mississippi. The Whigs were the slave owners. They were the big plantation owners. The Democrats were more the populace, the people. They wanted to secede. The Whigs did not, because they were afraid they were going to lose their slaves. So Mississippi threw this out to the Whigs in order to get them to come over to the secession convention. There's no doubt about that. There was a lot of political interplay, backroom deals being cut, trying to get Mississippi out of the Union. That was part of it.
Now, there's talk about there may be 700 Confederate monuments across the United States in some 31 states. And it's been said that many were put up between the 1890s and the 1950s. They weren't put up, I guess, immediately after the Civil War. And the argument is that they were put up kind of to hammer home Jim Crow, to assert supremacy, white supremacy in some way. I'm sure you've heard that. What do you say to that? That these didn't go up, Robert E. Lee statues didn't go up right after the Civil War. They went up later, and they went up at a time when African Americans were trying to assert their civil rights.
Well, number one, why didn't the South spend their resources building monuments post-war? I'll tell you why, because the South was intentionally punished with poverty by the Yankee Empire post-war. It was a poverty that continues even today. When you look at the South, we're the per capita lowest income of any section of the country. The South didn't have the money to spend on monuments. We were barely living. As a matter of fact, thousands of Southerners starved to death post-war. The Yankee government wasn't concerned about it. When I say Southerners, I'm not talking about white Southerners. I'm talking about all of us, all Southerners. A great suffering occurred post-war. Now, 1890 was when the progressives up in the North endorsed Jim Crow, and C. Vance Woodard, a great historian, ended up his life in Connecticut. He was certainly not one of us, but he made the point that Jim Crow was born up north. It did not come down south until about the 1890s, the date you mentioned, when the progressives brought it down south. So, up until then, up until 1890, there was no great Jim Crow segregation laws in the South, but it came from the North. There's a northern scholar author who talks about how the virus of northern racism was brought down south. Now, there's a reason for that. Why? Because empires must rule the conquered people. How do you rule a conquered people? You rule them by dividing the people against each other. It's called divide and rule.
Well, does that mean you're saying that they helped put up the statues? Because I guess my point is, I'm getting to, why are these statues needed? And could they then cause people discomfort? I mean, if slavery was a major reason for the Civil War, and then all of a sudden, years after the Civil War, between the 1890s and the 1950s, these statues start going up, and there are people that feel as though the purpose is to, well, you've heard the reasons that some have said is that it's to advance Jim Crow. Why if people feel that uncomfortable by these statues, why is it so important to have so many in so many public places?
Well, first of all, those statues were put there mostly by private donations and some matching funds of the local governments. That is something because everybody wanted to honor their grandfather, really their fathers at that time, who were aged old veterans. Yeah. But listen, in 1925, the United States minted a coin, a 50-cent piece showing General Lee and General Stonewall Jackson. Now, was that an attempt to advance racism by the United States government mint? In 1951, the U.S. Post Office had commemorative stamps of Lee and Jackson and Confederate veterans. Was that an attempt by the Post Office to advance racism? In 1961, the United States Navy had 2 submarines, one named for Lee and one named for Stonewall Jackson. Was that an attempt to advance racism? Of course not. Of course not. And yet, you'll take a univariable one thing and say, look, just because this happened at this time, that means without a doubt it was racism. No, there was a lot going on at that time. And our people were just coming out from under poverty. We were wanting, our old veterans were starting to die off. They wasn't going to be around much longer. So we certainly wanted to do something to honor them. And that's what we did. We raised monuments and put them up, statues. Now, again, if I'm offended by, and let me tell you something, I'm offended every time I go down a certain street in a certain town in Louisiana and see this big mosque with this crescent on top of it. I'm offended. As a Christian, I know those people don't like us, and they've got a jihad against us. All right, I'm offended. Does that give me a right to say, nope, they can't have that? Of course not.
Well, that mosque is not in the town square. That mosque has a right to exist. And I think people would say statues should go in museums. But here what you have are statues in our state capitals and on top of state capitals. I think that and in the middle of town squares, that is the difference.
The difference is men gave their lives at the behest of the state government, of the Tennessee state government, gave their lives protecting their homes and their families from an invader. That's the difference. That's a major difference. It was like General Beauregard said, the North came in as an industrial empire and an invader. The Southern soldier stood to defend his family from an invader's torch. That's the difference, a major difference.
And you want to honor the people who died, who died fighting in that war. Do you see the other side, that they feel like it's kind of, that was about oppressing them, and every time they see that statue they feel oppressed? And so I know we're about to start taking calls, but do you feel there is room for compromise here, that yeah, we need to remember our history, but the number of statues and the placement of statues, maybe that needs to be reconsidered? Or what about some area of compromise here? Do you see the other side's point of view?
Well, what I don't see is why the other side gets to define my heritage. The South, Southerners, we make up a minority in the United States of America, but we're the only minority that cannot define our own heritage. Our heritage is defined by people that dislike us, people that refuse to understand us, that refuse to accept us. So yes, there's plenty of, in a democratic society, there should always be room for discussion and compromise. I once was asked, are you opposed to the folks in New Orleans changing the name of George Washington School? And I said, no. When that school was built, people who built it, it was probably built back in the 1920s. No, it was a different population. So if it changes, that's no problem. I don't have a problem with them changing that. They can name it after whoever they want to. What I have a problem with is that those same people will not allow us in a area that would like to honor General Lee to have a school named after General Lee. You see, all people are, it's like George Orwell, an Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And the South is, those of us who love our heritage, we have no say in America.
Well, you have a lot of statues up, and there are a lot of things named. I mean, it's kind of hard to say that you have nothing, because you clearly have a lot right now. But I guess the debate is, to what extent should they remain, and where should they remain? And we have to take a break because we've gone way over, and we have a lot of calls. But thank you for talking to us. Okay, we're going to take a break. If you're on the line, hold on. We'll get to your call. Take a break. Be back right after this.
Storm 5 weather update. For weather on the go, download the Storm Shield app.
Another round of showers and storms impacted mainly our western tier during the afternoon hours of Wednesday. All of that is expected to fall apart and die off as we head towards the late evening hours, thankfully. Now, we will still likely see some rises in low-lying areas, especially near streams and creeks, as runoff accumulates. So be mindful of flood-prone spots and just go ahead and avoid those streams and creeks that can be real fickle. This is what temperatures look like across the southeast. And, of course, currently right here in Nashville. Overnight tonight, we're going to bottom out in the 70s with skies becoming much quieter, drier conditions. Some patchy fog is possible as you start the day on Thursday, especially if you were rained on Wednesday. That reinforced ground moisture can help set the stage for a murky start. We'll keep things pretty steamy and hot as we head towards the first weekend of July. Temperatures in the low 90s as we head towards our holiday, with just a chance for a few stray showers and storms both Saturday and Sunday afternoon. I'm Storm 5 meteorologist Bree Smith.
There is no single answer to securing your financial future. You need to look at it from every side. Get dependable advice you can count on every week with the Retirement Report on NewsChannel 5 Plus. Experts on finance, taxes, and the legal system are ready to answer your questions. Don't wait to make a plan for your money. The Retirement Report, Friday mornings at 8 and at these encore times on NewsChannel 5 Plus.
A lot of effort goes into selling your home, making it picture perfect. With the guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate, you can receive an all-cash offer, bypass the market, and close in as little as 21 days. There's no showings, no open houses, no stress. The guaranteed offer puts you in control. It's the hassle-free way to sell your home. Go to markspain.com to get a guaranteed offer on your home today and start packing.
We wake up each and every day and watch in awe at how we've grown, all we've accomplished, and what our community can do. We are all part of a transformation, sparkling with energy and spirit. Not every day is smooth sailing, and there's always hard work to be done. But we have so much for which to be grateful. We celebrate life's moments, large and small. We've invited everyone to share what makes our home special, welcoming, beautiful. We realize in the day-to-day stories of our city, it's not always easy to appreciate the big picture. These big pictures are brought to you by NewsChannel 5's Sky 5. Look for a fresh perspective each new day.
Welcome back, everyone, to Open Line. Glad you were with us. We have with us Ron Kennedy tonight. He is the Deputy Chief for Heritage Promotions. He is with the National Sons of Confederate Veterans all the way down in Louisiana. He's joining us via Zoom. There he is in his home. Thank you again for being with us, Mr. Kennedy. We kind of set the table for the discussion in the first segment, and we have a bunch of calls. So I'm just going to start taking them in the order we got them. Let's go to Joe. Hello, Joe.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Okay, well, I just want to kind of brief on the history, too. Is Mr. Kennedy's clear in his understanding, that Southern lives matter, and Americans today, they throw out numbers like 400 years of slavery and nonsense like that, but most of the northern colonies banned slavery before we even became the United States. As a matter of fact, President Thomas Jefferson actually banned the import of slaves in 1804. So the United States was inflicted with slavery from the British Empire. It wasn't something that the United States created. This was all inflicted on us. Unfortunately, the Confederacy caused a national threat to our republic, and that's, that was the disappointment of it, because I think he's kind of right. In the northern states, after we became a country, it did allow this slavery to continue in the South, and that really separated us. Unfortunately, I'm not on his side with Confederate monuments, in the same way I'm not on the side of the New York, like the state of New York has a monument to Benedict Arnold. I mean, he was a traitor, and so was the Confederacy. They were treasonous. They should have, all the leaders in the Confederacy should have been tried for treason against the Union.
So you don't think we should have monuments because they were trying to leave the Union, and that was essentially treason? Right.
So, I mean, if somebody wants to have them in their house, that's fine, and good on them.
Okay.
But,
all right, well, let's ask him about that. All right, Joe, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, what do you think of that?
Well, I think he raises a great point, and I'm glad he did. Thank you for listening and for your question. The question about treason: are these Confederate soldiers traitors to the United States of America? Well, first of all, if that's the case, then West Point is a traitor. West Point is guilty of treason. Why? Because the very first textbook used at West Point to teach the Constitution was written by Judge William Rawle. He was an abolitionist. He was from Pennsylvania, but his textbook, A View of the Constitution, on chapter 31 of the 25, I think it's chapter 32 of the 1829 edition, it's titled Of the Permanency of the Union, and it gives the policy, the procedure of which a state may secede from the Union. Wow. Yes, the federal government taught the right of secession, and which is not unusual. Everyone accepted it at that point in time before Lincoln and the Republican Party took over. But this, and he also has a chapter in his book on the Constitution about treason, a whole chapter dedicated to treason. Now,
but
I know
the notion that they were fighting against the United States, and they wanted to leave and kind of make the United States less than what it was, is that not treason?
No. What you're saying is empire building. You're wanting to maintain control of a geographical territory and a people for the benefit not of the people that's being invaded, but for the benefit of the people who are backing the invasion. There is a treason against the very principle of what? Not the Constitution, but the Declaration of Independence. It says we all have a right to a government that is ordered upon the consent of the governed. And when that consent is no longer worthy, we have the right to withdraw that consent. That's in the Declaration of Independence, sir. No, the South was, our Southern ancestors were not traitors, they were patriots.
Do you hope
in
this day in 2020, do you hope that one day there is a separation? Do you, or are you happy with the way things are right now? Do you hope one day the South is able to, I guess, secede, or are you happy with the way things are right now?
I am definitely not happy with the way things are right now. And if you'll look at a map of the counties of the United States of America, you'll see the vast majority of the people in the counties voted red. They're not happy with the way things are. And if we're not careful, secession will break out, but it won't be the old-fashioned states seceding from the Union. It's going to be the red counties seceding from the blue counties. You're going to see, and it's not Southerners that are saying this. This is Northern liberal politicians saying there's a coming civil war. Well, we better start acting.
Is that what you would like? I mean, is that what you would like?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Not a coming civil war. Now, do I want to see the time in which we, the people of the sovereign state, can make determinations for ourselves and not the Supreme Court. Give you an example. This past week, the Supreme Court of the federal government told Louisiana, we don't have the right to decide when life begins and whether or not that life deserves the protection of the state. Now, what founding fathers would have voted for the Constitution had they known that one day the federal government that they were creating would be able to tell a state that, nope, you can't protect the life of the unborn?
All right.
It wouldn't have happened.
Let's go back to the phones here, and we're talking with Ron Kennedy. He is with the National Sons of Confederate Veterans. He's joining us from Louisiana. Let's go to Corey now on line 2. Hello, Corey. Go right ahead.
Hey, Ben, you doing all right?
Yes, doing all right. Go ahead.
Doing good, doing good. All right. I mean, I believe racists already have enough of a platform, so I'm not really even going to direct anything towards him. Let's go ahead and acknowledge what these monuments are glorifying and what their intent is. It's an ideology-based reassurance that white nationalism and white supremacy is still alive. And when those come down, they will feel like it is not their country anymore. Let's go ahead and acknowledge the fact that people like him and people who are like him and like Trump and who support Trump, they are the only ones that can deem it necessary when they can fight back. When they want to take up arms against a tyrannical government, they will find it necessary. When they can't go get a haircut, they'll take guns to the Capitol buildings. But when you have communities out here that have been oppressed for 400 years, and when they fight back, listen to what people like him say. Because the same people fighting back have been under rule and under severe oppression, systemic and generational oppression from people with an ideology like his. So he's not seeing a monument come down. He's seeing his ideology come down. He's seeing his ideology being confronted full force in a way that he's not experienced. Because he might be older, but he's not old enough to actually experience a population of people fighting back for their basic human rights to live.
All right, let's talk about that. Corey, thank you. So Corey is saying this is more than monuments. They represent white nationalism, white supremacy, and as long as they stay up, that is perpetuated. It's still alive. What do you say to what he said there?
Well, it's very interesting that he has the support of the monopolistic media behind him. And what he says is probably, if you were to take a poll of Americans, a lot of Americans believe that. Well, why? That's the only thing they've heard of late. Our side never gets out. Our side of the story is never told. But he speaks of ideology. The ideology that he seems to be promoting is the ideology of postmodernism, in which you attack and destroy the very foundations of Western Christian civilization and replace it. Now, you just don't destroy it just for no reason. You've got an ideological idea of what you want to replace it with. And it's something probably more along the lines of a enforced equality of outcome by some type of a socialist style government. That I'm opposed to, but that has nothing to do with the Sons of Confederate Veterans. These monuments were put up to honor our ancestors. My great-grandfather wore the gray. A yeoman farmer wore the gray. He was in a rifle pit down on the Yazoo River during the siege of Vicksburg when we sunk the USS Cairo.
Do you believe the races are equal? You read some of these old things that were said here in Mississippi when they seceded and others, that clearly wasn't the belief. Today, do you believe the races are equal?
Well, first of all, don't just pick on Mississippi. When Plessy versus Ferguson was passed in by the federal Supreme Court, the federal government made Jim Crow legal, not the Confederate Supreme Court, and it used a Massachusetts law as the premise, as the foundation for it. And the Supreme Court judge was from Michigan, not Mississippi. So let's don't pick on Mississippi. By the way, every Supreme Court, federal Supreme Court justice voted in favor of Jim Crow except one. He was a Southerner. His family had owned slaves. So let's be careful how we throw around that these Southerners, us Southerners are endemically evil. We're not. It's not true. But that ideology, that postmodern ideology, is taught in schools. It permeates our society. It's a part of every journalist training. So naturally, they have a one world view.
Well, I wanted to give you a chance to respond, because he basically said he called you a racist, and I wanted to give you a chance to say, do you believe both the races are equal?
Oh, I think I think that's an absurd question. It shouldn't even be asked. It should be presumed in America today in 2020 that everyone believes that, unless someone says otherwise, in which case you want to get away from that guy as fast as you can. I mean, it's just, yeah. And that's one of the problems. White supremacy or racial supremacy is a marker. You can put that marker down. When you pass that marker, you've gone too far to the right. You better back off, brother. That's too. That has led to some real bad things in a recent history.
All right, we're going to take a break. We have to take a break. We have a bunch of calls here. Sorry. Okay, well, good. I'm glad that you answered that. Okay, we'll take a break. I'll be back right after this.
Let's go to Diana. Hi, Diane.
Hi. I'm glad you're having this program. I've evidently had a lot of misconceptions about this myself.
Renting out a property for the long term is a business activity.
You come hang out in Nashville for more than 6 hours and you say, we have to do something to address the traffic situation.
I oppose what's being done.
It's truly obnoxious.
Where will this stop? This is what's going on. I oppose this man that's got on the show.
If our faith means anything, then it has to mean something in the darkest, most complicated places, and that's prison in our society.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open Line.
All right, let's go to Joe. Joe, good morning.
You're streaming live on Facebook.
Hello, Larry. Larry, good morning.
Misty on Facebook says a lot of guns should be banned.
Hi, Larry.
Taking my call.
Sure.
And several calls, so let's go to the phones. Laura. Hello, Laura.
What I'm finding listening to y'all is that this just is not a black and white issue.
This 4th of July, there will be no crowd, but the show will go on. Nashville's skyline will light up with fireworks. Music will be playing. We'll be reminded what unites us. News Channel 5 will be the only station to bring it to you. Watch Let Freedom Sing, Music City, July 4th, Saturday night at 9 on News Channel 5.
30 million Americans have found themselves unemployed.
News Channel 5 wants to help you rebound and get our community back to work.
We're launching a new website, Finding the Jobs for You.
We've partnered with SHR Talent to offer free career tools to help you land the perfect job.
People just need a starting point.
See what companies are hiring now.
Cracker Barrel website.
Get help punching up your resume.
What are your interests? What are your goals?
And sign up for one-on-one career coaching. Free. Find the link to your rebound at newschannel5.com.
Well, welcome back to Open Line. We have with us Ron Kennedy. He is with the National Sons of Confederate Veterans. He's joining us via Zoom from Louisiana, talking about Confederate monuments and all of the controversy there. A bunch of calls. Let's go to Wayne. Hello, Wayne. Go right ahead.
Hello.
What is on your mind?
Am I on?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I appreciate you having me. I'd just like to read some facts out and let Ron say yes or no. The Union Army owned 71,000 slaves during the Civil War. Slavery still existed at the time of the Civil War in several northern states. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free anybody. Lincoln said, if you'll come back within the Union within 100 days, you can keep your slaves. I wish you would speak about the tariff of abominations, which put a 62% tariff on 80% of the goods of the South, and I think the North just wanted the South to pay for all government. The state that imported more slaves than any other state in the Union was Connecticut. During the time of the Civil War, the number one industry in the state of New York was slave ship building. Matter of fact, during the war, they were still importing slaves into the Caribbean. After the war, up northeast, they were still importing slaves, and I think it was Grant who told them if they didn't quit it, they'd come up there and hang them. So this being really altruistic is uncalled for. By the way, if you've ever heard of Long Hunter State Park, which is in Antioch, right on the Laverne side of Nashville, that was a plantation that was one of the biggest plantations in the state, and the plantation owner was a black man. Only 6% of the Southern people owned slaves. Buffalo soldiers.
There were thousands of slaves. I guess I get what you're saying, but what are you trying to?
Let me say this: the Buffalo soldiers, after the Civil War, helped the Northerners, the South, when anything to do, to go out and slaughter the American Indian, and you don't hear a word about that.
Well, so okay, yeah. All right. I guess we're getting back to slavery. He wants to make the point that slavery was big in other parts, and the bottom line is that was what the war was about, for the most part. You may disagree with that, I guess, but if you read why they seceded, I mean, it talks about slavery, maintaining slavery, and if you want to try and sugarcoat that, I don't know how you do it, but you can respond to what he said.
You don't sugarcoat, you use the facts. The facts is Senator Thomas Hart Benton back in 1840 said that the South was being, the economy of the South was being destroyed by the North through their, as the caller just said, the tariff, the Memorial tariffs, for instance, the tariffs of abomination.